Should you be busting your butt in AP or taking IB? Or is the normal track secretly the smartest play?
Also, all these kids are doing a million extracurriculars. Some are even starting fake clubs. Like, which of them actually matter to admissions offices?
So let's talk about AP versus IB. You have an opinion on this. I have some ideas. Where would you start with this question?
AP, IB, or normal. My opinion on AP courses, IB, and normal is that they're
Well,
all
AP
fantastic.
is your initials.
Yeah, AP is my initials.
It's
Outside
also
of my
our
initials,
initials, admission prep.
that's true. And it was not designed that way. But my opinion on AP, IB, or normal courses is that
What's your hot take? Give
my
us your
hot
real
take,
edgy opinion.
it's that you actually don't need to do AP and IB to get into a
Are
good university.
what Ari? But I can hear parents and teachers screaming at you right now, saying, "What you want our kids to be less ambitious? Like what the hell?"
No, I mean you can do AP and IB. There's nothing wrong with that. It's just for a lot of students who maybe aren't 100% certain that they can get good grades, it can sometimes hurt their chances more than help them. If you're really, really strong academically and you know you're going to do well, take the AP and IB courses. It's awesome prep for university. You get to not have to do some credits. But for a lot of students who maybe aren't that academically strong, taking those harder courses and then struggling and getting poor grades is actually going to just hurt you and hurt your chances of getting into a good school more than it's going to help. So you really have to self-assess, and that's my hot take. And I know everyone wants to just say go do those things, but you don't have to. You really don't. You can get in with normal courses.
Yeah, it's kind of like okay. Let's see if we can get an analogy. Might have to try a couple analogies here. So the first one will be skiing. Imagine that you are
No
a
good at skiing.
well, okay, so then this will work for you. So you're let's say you're a novice skier, which you are, and we're like, let's make a beautiful like TikTok or like Instagram of you like cruising down the slopes. We would choose to put you on the green run, right?
Yes.
Because like you'll look good there. On the green run, it's a bit easier. Uh, Everything will look good, and you'll look nice. If but if we take you on the black diamond and we send you down that, is that going to be a pretty sight?
No, it might go viral for all the wrong reasons.
Yeah, so that is it. So we would be sending you down the black diamond run when you don't have the skills and ability, and then what people are actually looking at is that video of you going viral for what do they call it, like a garage sale, where like you've got poles here, skis over here, and you've just yard sailed everything across the mountain. Is that does that analogy work?
Yeah, totally. Now, if you're a black diamond level skier, which I clearly am not, go down the black diamond, go down the AP and IB courses, and it's going to look
Yeah.
even better, right? You're going to look like those guys on Red Bull's YouTube channel doing death-defying stunts. But for the students who know they maybe don't have that ability, should really be on the green, I guess you could say, the green slopes, then it's just gonna not be great if you go up there. And that's what I always recommend because students feel like it's the end of the world if they don't do AP or IB. And honestly, it's not. It's not the end of the world if you don't do that. And some people are not gonna like hearing my opinion on that.
Yeah, well, I think it's one of the things that we always try to look at is being strategic, not just following the crowd. And let's take one quick example. If you're an athlete, then it's probably not a good, like a competitive athlete, it's probably not a good idea to take IB because there's not a lot of flexibility in the courses, the timing, your schedule. I heard one student call IB short for I'm busy because you're just packed. So when you don't have the flexibility, and because maybe you're a high level athlete, or this could be dancer or musician or something, just something extracurricular that is very demanding on your schedule, IB might not be the best fit because you're going to struggle in it. And then when you struggle in it, then you look bad to a university. Whereas you take the normal courses per se, then you're going to have the flexibility and you're going to be able to succeed, right? So in that case, it's not an advantage. But IB can be an advantage if you are able to take it, you're able to dedicate the time, you're able to do it well, And then that also helps you in university because in IB you're taking university level courses in high school,
Mhm.
right? So that's kind of the thinking that you want to have is not just, oh, IB is the highest, hardest, most competitive thing, therefore I should do that. No, we want to be thinking strategically. What is the best for me and my goals? Now, what about AP? AP.
What about AP? I mean, I think it remains very similar. If you're quite confident, you have a great track record in that field of study, like maybe it's calculus, for example, then take the AP course. If you know you're going to do quite well, because you'll get the credit in university. But if it's something you're not the best at and you're thinking you want to do it just to get a credit, you probably don't want to get a bad grade. It's going to have it's not, it's going to put you in the wrong direction. So I feel exactly the same way about AP for many students as you just mentioned about IB. It's something you only need to do if you know you've got the previous track record of doing well in that, and if you do and you're feeling really confident, go for it. It's going to look great and you're going to get a credit off at university.
And the other area where you want to be taking AP, if you're a Canadian student considering going to the US, is you need to be taking all the major courses as AP courses. Now, this is, of course, if we're going to a top American school, because what they're looking for is they're looking to see that the students that they're accepting are international students. You're not just a Canadian student applying to an American school and they're just looking at you that way. They're looking at all of the international students. So
Mhm.
they need to see that you've done an IB or AP curriculum and that you've done all the major subjects
Yeah,
as
totally.
AP courses. But that is like, we often talk about this, like American schools, while top notch, it's also like something that really only the most ambitious and also able students should be applying for because the cost is so much higher. Yes, the payoff can also be high. We can talk about that, but the cost to attend is so high relative to a Canadian school. And the difference in quality of education and opportunities beyond it aren't that much bigger. I think if you were at a Harvard or a Yale or a Stanford, MIT, than it is. Or if you're planning on making the move down to the US after, well, that can be an asset. But if you're planning on coming back to Canada or studying in Canada, then it's not always a challenge worth biting off and chewing. And so,
Well, it depends
why?
where you're going. I think it really depends where you're going.
Yeah, it depends where you're going, depends your goals, depends your financial situation, right? If you can afford what, like $250,000 for an education, sometimes more, then it's a good thing to do. But my point with all that is more about the AP, which is that if you're shooting for those top level schools, then you do need to be in a high school and in a district or in a program that allows you to take those AP courses, and you got to be taking those. That is it's basically a prerequisite for going to the States, similar to doing the ACT and SATs.
Yeah, totally. I think, yeah, I guess I hope that clears that up for a lot of people because the amount of students that families that come in and they're debating AP or IB, I guess there's no straight answer. It comes down to what you're looking to do, where you're looking to go, and really what matters to you and your own skill level. That's really
It's
what
a
it looks like.
strategic choice. Just like shooting a lovely TikTok video on the ski slopes is a strategic choice, because it's not just a pure skill choice. It's not what's the hardest slope that I can actually go down and still survive. It's the which one do I look best in given my skill level.
Yes, exactly. That it has to match your skill level. Speaking of skill level, this is a question we get all the time. It's can I go to school and get an athletic scholarship? And I know your experience, you actually had that experience. You were at UBC as a varsity hockey player. So what do you have to say about getting an athletic scholarship in Canada? Is it something that you can do? Is it just an American fantasy like the kind of the movies, or what does that process look like? And what advice do you have for students?
I've got a lot of advice on this matter. I've got some hot. We're talking about hot takes. I got some hot takes. Let's start with let's break down the what the actual likelihood is that you're going to get an athletic scholarship. For the most part, I think that people don't realize how competitive university level sports are and how it is just under pro. usually, right? It's like you have people that are going pro, and then the people that don't quite make pro, or either maybe they're just like a year off, or they go to the second or third league of whatever they're doing, they're going to college. So it's not something where you can be like a semi elite, and I'm not throwing shade, but you can't be like a competitive per se person and then get a scholarship. Like you can't be someone who's just like competitive in your city or town and get an athletic scholarship. That is
What's
not.
your definition of competitive or pro? Like, what does that look like?
Yeah, I'll give you an idea. So like let's take swimming for example. Like the UBC swim team used to always win everything, and really the only people that were on it were not the only people. There were other people, but they were on provincial teams and national teams. So there wasn't someone who was just a like a high school level swimmer that like did well in the city, but couldn't make it to the provincial team and level. That wasn't that was on the team. Or like let's take hockey for example. Like and everything's changed so much in hockey, but like pretty much the entire team played in the WHL. So like in Ontario, that would be the equivalent would be the OHL, or Audi, so it'd be the Q. And so, let's take our field hockey team. Like most of the team was like national players. Like they were actually like national players. So you can't be a regional level player and expect to be receiving an athletic scholarship. Of course, things can happen, and I'm really, 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 really sorry to say that because a lot of parents and students come on, and that's a hopeful dream of theirs, but it's really just not a reality. And I can tell you, though, that there are the Rudy stories where students who are hardworking, maybe they're not at that provincial or national level, and maybe they're a later developer, they can do what's called a walk-on, and
Right.
sometimes they
I
will
was going
get
to ask
signed.
about that.
Yeah, so they can get signed out of the walk-on process, and I can explain that a bit more. But they're usually not getting scholarships. You got to always ask yourself again, is it worth it for my goals? Because now you're going to incur a lot of additional costs, a lot of additional time. You're not going to get any money for it. You're not going to get your education subsidized. Is it worth it? Maybe it is. But what do you know about walk-ons? What can I clarify for you?
I know nothing about a walk on. So walk on is you go to campus. I was definitely not a walk on. I could barely walk and like much less like compete at an athletic level. So how do you go to university and you just attempt to try out for a team? Is that basically it?
Yeah, really, like if you're playing university level sports or like on an athletic university athletic team, and you can send, like I said, you can send all your hate mail to us. I'm sorry if I'm crushing dreams. I'm doing this with the intent of educating people so they know what expectations to have, not so that I'm not trying to poo poo on that. But what typically someone who's going to university is usually being recruited by the coach, or someone on one of the coaches of the team, like 1 or 2, sometimes 3 years ahead of when they actually get their scholarship. So, for example, a lot of the soccer players, like female soccer players that I know, they would. My wife was on the UBC soccer team and was a national champion, by the way. But like they had their commitments and scholarship amounts locked in grade 11. So,
Right.
and some of them in grade 10, I believe. But so they had that locked in grade 11. Myself, hockey's a little bit different. Hockey, you tend to play up to like high school age. And then sometimes early, you're going off to play junior hockey. And then, so you're typically playing that for 2 to 3 years after. And some will even have a little touch of pro, like they'll play a little bit of pro. And then if pro is not seeming like it's going to work out, because usually like the pro level that like this would be like second or third tier pro, it's not a lot of money. So if they're thinking I need to figure out my career, they'll come back to school, they'll play at that level, and then they'll go. But my point is with that is like they're playing at such a high level, and they're usually recruited very like a season at least in advance. I don't think in hockey we've ever had a walk on that I've seen. Every school at UBC had open tryouts, Like you
Mhm.
have to host open tryouts, and there is an open tryout session, and sometimes players do walk on. And the key part of that is that they have to be part of the school. Like they can't, you can't just like show up one day to tryouts if you're not accepted and a part of that school. You have to be in that school, and then you can.
Right. Okay, gotcha. So it sounds like basically if you're going to go to one of these top universities that have a varsity level team, you kind of know if you're going to get there by like grade 10, 11 due to the recruitment process. And if you're not there, it's probably not going to happen unless you're in like, unless you get very lucky. Is that about right?
That is about right, unless you're in a weird sport like hockey or I think men's soccer. They'll sometimes go play pro for a bit too in Europe, that kind of thing.
So now another question, and I think this is a unique perspective for you. And I know there is might be a parent or a student that's like, I want to give a pro a shot because hockey is their passion, soccer is their passion, and then they want to consider school. Um, what do you recommend for that student? And maybe if you're a little bit like of your story, because I think you played hockey and then you went to UBC. So what do you recommend for that person? Maybe there's a parent listening and they're like, my kid wants to play pro, but I kind of want him to go to school. What do you think that should look like for the person listening?
Well, it depends on your values and what you value. So if you value education, and because by the way, you can go play pro and then go back to school. Like there's nothing against doing that. Um, and and then you just be doing it later. So what a lot of families will think of is they'll like most students that go down the university pathway, what they're doing is they value education. They kind of see it as a good backup plan. They see it as a good place to like develop before potentially launching their pro career. And that's usually what happens. It's kind of rare that someone really goes and plays pro and then for more than a season before coming back to university. Because what they're usually doing is like they're asking themselves, because if they're in the let's take hockey. Basketball would probably be similar, like maybe football. Like in hockey, if you're playing in the AHL, which is just under the NHL, you might be making like 60, 70, 80 grand roughly a year, which is like a decent salary. But if you go down to the East Coast League, it's more like 30, 40. It's like not very much, maybe less even. It's not very much money, and it's not something you can build a long career on because, let's say you can play for 10 years. Like playing on for 10 years on $30,000 is not a lot of money, right? So you need to start to develop that earning potential. So most people that kind of go to pro and then drop back to college, they're going to do so pretty quickly. They're going to do that within a year or so, or they're just going to retire and then go back to college. There is rules around, and I'm sure those things have like all shifted a bunch, but it was like every year that you play pro is a year of eligibility lost of the ability to play U sport. So you can't go play pro for 4 years and then come back and then play hockey for 4 years because
So how did that work?
you have
Like if
five
I
years
if
ago you have 5 years of
okay,
eligibility, but I don't know some I don't know exactly how it worked, but there's a lot of athletes that had much more than five than five. Like they do their sports for like 6 years. I think maybe it's like per sport, and they were like multi-sport athletes and stuff, but I
right.
don't know. But as I know, it's just five. And if you like each season you play pro, you burn a year of that eligibility, basically.
Gotcha. So I guess like you can do it. You can give it a shot and you can come back. You'll just be kind of redoing the application process at
Yeah,
that point. And how
yeah.
was that for you? Because I know you went, you played, and then you had to redo it. How is it navigating that? I guess well, it's not even a transfer. It's like a late application, basically. How'd that go for you?
Well, that like I got in right away. I had a great supplemental. I had a good GPA, and so I was in like right away into the program I wanted to go to. And actually, what I had done in grade 12 was I had applied to UBC and a bunch of other schools, so I knew I could get in. Like, that was my mom guiding me at that point. There was no admission prep at the time. It was just Margaret. That was my admission prep. And I was like so late to the game. Like I look back on like what we advise students to do now and also what I know the strategies were. And I was like, I can't believe how late I was. That was just like playing with fire. But I also knew I wasn't going to school the next year. I was going to go play hockey. So my mom said, hey, go and apply to these different schools. So I did. I applied to like 4 or 5 of them. I got into all of them. So that just had me have a bunch of confidence that when I would go to reapply in the future, I knew I could get in to UBC and a few other schools. So that felt good, and and I knew that. But I think like an important thing to touch on for people considering athletic scholarships is we always think of sports as so unpredictable. It is like, you might make the NHL or like, I don't know, be driving the bus. That's like the bad analogy of it. But like sometimes that difference is not that big, and it might be like one bad coach in the wrong season. That is sports. That is life. Luck can happen. So we always, encourage people to have plan B, have lots of different options available. And in doing so, you're not going to panic if your plan A doesn't work out. So where I'm going with this is that you want to be an athlete that can get into the school of your choice. So if you want to, like, let's say which I did, I wanted to go to UBC, and I knew I could get in on my own academic standing. Therefore, I was more likely to be offered a spot on the team too, because the coaches at some schools, and it very much differs by school, they actually have like spots that they can kind of like get people in at lower, things, and so they can get so that if they need to burn up one of those spots to get you in because you couldn't get in on your own merit, well, now they got to weigh you against another player. Now, if you're an excellent athlete, you're the best of the best, well, great. So don't worry about it. But if you are kind of on that bubbly level, or you're an average person and that's going to tip the balance, well, getting in on your own merit, that can help you get that scholarship, part of the program, and then you don't have to worry about getting into school on your own, or with the help of a team.
Yeah, I mean, honestly, it sounds like, and this is going to sound so boring to so many people. It's as boring as you want to keep all your options open while pursuing your dreams. You want to keep your pathways open. You want to be the student who can compete at the highest level and get into an athletic program, get into a good school and compete and ideally play. They're not, you don't want to just hinge your chances on just being good at sports. Just you
No.
want to have that backup option. Did I get that
Yeah.
right?
Yeah, it is. And I want to ask you what you find the most surprising about all this is in a second. But maybe like the last thing I'll leave you with is that for me, I had an athletic scholarship that covered roughly half of my tuition, and that was like a great deal. There
What about
were
living? What about living? Did it cover living?
No, just tuition.
Wow.
And I would have been kind of like mid range on my team. There were people that had probably there were some people that would have more of their tuition done, but like on our team, it was quite rare to have the school, as in like UBC and our team, doing like a full scholarship. And I think like a full scholarship, as in tuition. I think there's some sort of rule in Canada, which is that tuition cannot be anything beyond tuition cannot be paid. That's not so in the States. States a whole different animal. But in Canada, I think it's like up to the full tuition. But that said, there's quite a good deal in Canada in hockey with the WHL, the Canadian Hockey League. So QMHL, QMJHL, and the OHL. And what they have is for every year that they play, they get a free year of school.
Interesting.
If I play in the WHL for 1 year, I get 1 free year of school. But you can also sign deals to do more than that. The GMs in the WHL will hate me for saying that, OHL, etc. But you can, but only if you're a good player, obviously. But how a lot of my teammates were doing well was they would get a little bit of scholarship money from the school, from the program, but then also the WHL was paying for their tuition and their books. And it's the same deal for the OHL, McHugh, etc. So that's a really good deal. Not a lot of other, but the stipulation is that you go from your final year of junior right to school. So that's a good deal. Not a lot of other sports have that, and in fact, I think it's quite rare across all the sports that like full scholarships are offered. Sports are expensive, especially university level sports. So those athletic
Right.
scholarships that cover that, it's really probably for your top, I'm guessing, top, because it's not transparent data, but it's like your top like 2 to 5 players depending on the funding of the school. Otherwise, it's really not much of a thing. So what surprises you most about all of that are?
Well, I think what surprised me the most is American. I guess the American sports and collegiate level sports dominate so much of the media headlines, even in Canada, that we assume Canadians assume it's so similar. The scholarship amounts maybe are the same, but you have to do your research because they're not, right? And you can't be hinging your entire academic future on hoping to get a full ride. If you are that 2 to 5 floors, as you said, that's fantastic. You can at least get your tuition covered, but there's still a living depending on where you go to school. So I guess that's probably the biggest learning is it's so different in the two countries, more so than I was probably expecting. Like I knew it, but it's even more so than I thought. And I think it's good for people to know that, especially in Canada,
Yeah.
that it is that different.
And if you look at the states, so let's say school there is like, I don't know, 25 grand tuition US. Living is going to be like less expensive. And I'm talking 25 grand US as an American in the states.
Yeah.
So now they get a $15,000 scholarship from their school, right, or from their team, which is like that would be great. That sounds like a lot of money. That's what's that, $60,000 over 4 years. Well, yeah, but you also started at a much higher amount. So like a $15,000 US scholarship in Canada would pay for your whole year living and
Right.
tuition. But because the sticker price is already so much higher for American school costs, well, a big scholarship doesn't actually cover that. But then also the Ivy Leagues, there's other schools as well, of course, big country, right? But the Ivy Leagues, they don't even work on there's no such thing as a full ride there. It's all based on, I'm sure there's other deals that get worked out with the name, image, and likeness stuff that's going on now, but it's all just based on financial aid. So it doesn't matter
Right.
if your parents make $40,000 or $400,000. You all get plugged into the same financial aid calculation, and then that's what your scholarship is based off of. If you go to play for, I don't know, men's soccer team at Harvard or go rowing, like that's how that gets calculated. So yeah, that full ride thing with Ivy League schools is like not really a thing, but it can be for like, let's say you go to like, I don't know, Michigan State for something, or
Hmm.
Minnesota or whatever, and you go to one of those schools. Yeah, full ride can be a thing, but again, you're looking at people that are like, they're tempting you to go to, I don't know, I don't know U.S. sports as much, but as much as I used to. But let's say like you're a hockey player and and Michigan State's recruiting you. They're tempting you to go to Michigan State for a couple of years instead of the NHL. That's what they're like, right? So that's where you get the big money. Is like they're like, yeah, well, you could get paid a $300,000 signing bonus, but we could also get you if you come to us, then your education, which is like half a million, or not half, but like $250,000, like you'll get that for free too. So that's how
Right.
they're attracting good players, is they're making that decision between pro and NCAA.
Mm.
And that's like, and I just say this because it's like people need to understand that like the like I said, the kind of, let's say you're a regional level athlete, you might be excellent, you might be hardworking, but if you're not competing with like people that are drafted in the NHL, you're probably not getting a full ride scholarship or whatever the
Right.
equivalent is in your sport. Like you're a national level. Like if you're going down for tennis, it's because you're probably on the edge of going pro, right? And it's like, should I go pro? And in tennis, you don't make too much money if you're pro and not in the top 50 in the world, or do you go to college?
Get an
And a lot of times,
education.
yeah, that's kind of a
Yeah.
no-brainer decision to make.
Right. Yeah. I guess there's levels to it, and
There's
that's
levels.
important.
Well, and then the other level is like, let's say you want the college experience, like the college sports experience, that exists too. Just know that it's going to cost you a lot of money, And I know people who are like, I got a scholarship, and they might have had a $500, $1,000 scholarship, and they went massively into debt for it. And that's a choice. If you want to do that, then that is a like the call, especially in the States, that would be really fun. The whole culture, the whole town, everyone is behind you there. And there's a lot of rah. You get that in small towns in Canada too. Um, but that's not all scholarships are scholarships.
Yeah, that
And I think by the
that's
time
very
parents,
interesting.
I think by the time parents and students get there, they don't want to kind of admit that they spent all the money developing to this level where they're only going to get a $4,000 scholarship. So they don't really share too much about the details of their scholarship because like it's a touch embarrassing. Like, you know what I mean? Like if the goal was a scholarship all along and then you finally realize, oh my God, I'm not really getting a scholarship, they just like buckle down and say, all right, we'll pay the cost. We'll go into student debt. We'll do that. So
Yeah.
I share that so that hopefully people that are considering this path get an open and honest look at like what's actually in your future.
Yeah, totally. And I guess like now they also know like it's very rare that a student will actually get their entire tuition covered by Canadian schools. You kind of have to either be the absolute best or be the absolute best in America, which is even harder. And we're not discouraging students going down that path. I guess rather it's the understanding of the true math or likelihood behind it that's so important. So you can just like kind of accurately prepare for all the different outcomes, right? That's really what matters, I think, for parents as well that are listening that want their student to potentially go down that.
Yeah, I think that's always the thing with like we talk about on the academic side a lot and the profile side and then also the athletic side. It's like when you say you have a goal, align your actions with that goal.
Hmm.
And so if you say, "Oh, I want to go to McMaster for health sciences," and you have a 75% average and no volunteer experience, let alone an initiator and wonderful critical thinking skills and blah blah blah, your goal and your actions are not aligned. So if you're saying I want an athletic scholarship and you're on the third string of your B team at your club, those actions and like your where you're at are not aligned. Again, doesn't mean you can't play that sport for fun. And I'm the biggest fan of sports for fun. I'm an awful tennis player recreationally, but I try my best. I try really, really hard, and I enjoy it. But I'm not going to compete on any level soon. So I'm a biggest fan of that. But just know that your expectations and the goal and your level are probably not aligned, and you might need to think of other things.
Yeah, that's probably the most accurate way to put it for a lot of people.
Yeah, and like if you're like going for it, then like work hard, like get a coach, invest the time, the money, the energy. It's so worth the journey. Like I'm not here to poo poo on college sports. I love my experience. It taught me so much how to manage time, how to manage stress, how to manage energy, how to it had a built-in community at school. It was amazing. If you're capable of doing it, I recommend you do it. Absolutely. Did it delay things for me a bit? Yes. Did it cost some extra dollars? Yes. Did it pay off? I think so. And so I think that I would recommend that for people for sure.
Would you do
Um,
it again?
yeah, absolutely, hands down. It was a
Cool.
wonderful experience. It was a really good experience. If you had that shot, Ari, like you were kind of like your own like varsity athlete and your own just on the academic side, like would you aim to go down that path? What do you
I
think?
was an academic varsity athlete.
Yeah, you
That-
were. You were. You honestly were.
yeah, I got academic awards is what I got. I think
A
I would
lot
have
more than
loved it.
me. And that's an
Yes.
important thing to think about is like you focusing more on the academics will like actually ended up with like more in the bank than I did focusing on athletics from a scholarship perspective, from a opportunity perspective.
Yeah. I mean, I think if I was good enough, I think I would have loved it. I think the
Yeah, because
community
it's
aspects
fun.
of it was so cool. My first year roommate was a track athlete at on the UBC team. And he was, as you mentioned, a national level athlete. He was ranked like top three in the country in high school. So he made it to the track team. And I thought the built-in community he had was awesome. It's like you kind of get installed into having friends, whereas A lot of people have to navigate that when they get to university. So if I was good enough, I would have loved it. It is a lot of work, and there are trade-offs. But I think if you can handle it and you really enjoy the sport you're playing, it's probably worth it for a lot of students.
Yeah, you can't get around the fact that it's fun. Like it's fun to
Yeah,
do that, and yeah, it's socially it's great, like you said. So yeah, we're not knocking that. I think just aiming to
yeah.
create that those realistic expectations for people.
Yeah, and I also wanted to ask you, speaking of like realistic expectations, this is I think something you've touched on a lot with students is how do you realistically plan out which schools you should apply to? If you want to get into the best school, like how do you like students sometimes don't know how to navigate. Do I go all in? How do I structure that? What do you recommend when it
Well,
comes
how
to, I
many
guess,
schools did you
realistically?
how many schools did you apply to? I always know UBC because that's where you went and got into school.
I really messed up. I did not follow the right advice. I only applied to two schools and I regret it immensely. Like I regret it wholeheartedly, essentially. I wish I
What was
applied
the
to
other
more.
school?
SFU.
Oh, okay, yeah. So too local. And why do you regret
Yeah.
it?
Because I got scholarships and I got accepted into all, and I probably would have got more offers, and I
Yeah.
probably would have been accepted into more schools. And I would have loved to sample some of the, not necessarily sample the schools, I would have had to commit. I would have loved being able to go to other schools and at least see other options I had. Now that I'm older, I'm like, oh, I should have looked at Ontario schools because I would have had a chance of getting into all of them because of how well I ended up doing in the process.
Weren't you recruited to other schools that you didn't apply to, or was that UBC?
Uh, it was one of the two, I think. Yeah, it wasn't other schools. No.
Right, right, right. Because that is like a cool thing that our students do tell us is that they sometimes are like actively recruited by schools. I think Kira talks about that, right?
Mhm. A little bit.
Yeah, but yeah, well, I'll answer your question, Ari. So like, it's very similar to how I think about the sports side of it, which is like your like you have your stretch, target, and reach, or sorry, stretch, target, safety. And a stretch is like that stretch goal that you're aiming for. If all the stars align, then you crush it and you hit that goal. So for me, it was like my stretch goal was the NHL. That's the stretch goal. If I land in the NHL, excellent. My like target was like UBC. Actually, I would probably say if I were to add a couple other stretches in there, it'd be like an NCAA Division I scholarship. That was like my other stretch goal. Now, neither of those things happened. So then I had my target, which was UBC. And UBC was like kind of exactly what I wanted. It was like the right level for my hockey. At the time, I would not have been able to, like, with my ego, share that. Like, but yeah, like that was roughly the right like level for me. And then also like my academics, like I had good academics, I had good marks, I had good extracurriculars, but I wasn't, honestly, I didn't know how to be a Stanford level person or a even like a Waterloo level engineer, like that kind of like top 5% thing. I didn't know how to do that. I had no guidance of that. So it was kind of the right school for me. And then I also had a few backup options. And so those backup options were ones that I absolutely know I could get into. Also, the skill level for my hockey was like above that. So I would have been really able to play at that level. And so that's what we recommend that students have is they have their stretch that is ahead of their level. And if everything aligns, they crush it. Target, which is probably at their level, maybe you got to push to get there, but it's like it should happen. And then safety backup so that if everything goes wrong, you're still in and you're still able to make forward progress. And that's so important so that students aren't stressing about having that one shot. And also
Yeah.
the biggest thing, exactly what you touched on, is options. Some students don't know that if they have these options that they might take them because school that maybe is C or D on your list might hand you a big scholarship. And
Yes.
maybe that changes all the math about attending that school because maybe it was further away and you're like, I don't really want to go to Ottawa or whatever. And then Ottawa or Carleton gives you a really great scholarship and like, maybe it makes a lot of sense to go there, even though it's like a little further away from Toronto or Vancouver, wherever you're from, right? So that's a super important thing. And along with that, when you apply to multiple, like we touched on, maybe you get recruited by one. I know that I think Kira mentioned like she was planning on going to. Kira's one of our past students, by the way, was really leaning towards U of A because she had a large award there. But it was some pushing and pulling from the recruiter at U of T that actually got her to go there. Now, if she's not in U of T's pipeline, she's not going to get that kind of treatment, right? The kind of like I
Yes.
just asked you, that wasn't a setup. That was just me not knowing
Yeah, no, totally. And I
that,
mean,
right?
you ideally are that student that has incredible, has incredible options and actually can talk to many schools and actually be speaking to representatives and actually picking the school. So that's the ideal state, right? And um, that would be hitting all your stretch goals. And that's ideally where you end up. But having the target and that safety with the school and the different goals in your life, sorry for the dogs and the office dogs in the background, is going to alleviate so much stress from so many students and parents who just think it's, you know, this school or bust. And it really does not have to be that way. And you can be set up for success either way.
Yeah, and when you're stressed, let's get into the neuroscience of it because you touched on UBC, touched on my
Yeah, I'm
program.
not qualified for that, but let's do it.
Kinesio, I have kinesiology degree and educate and part of the faculty of education. I also did business psychology, so I love all that stuff. And and I'm going to be a little bit of a pop psychologist, but like when you're stressed, you're in a fight or flight or fawn and also flee. They keep adding F's to this state, but basically, when you're stressed, you're in a more fear-based state. And when you're in a fear-based state, that's great for survival. Like literally, if you're like you're in a I don't know, someone threatens to beat you up, and you're in a fight or flight. It's like you're either going to sprint or fight, and that amping up of your stress response is a good thing because it's going to like help you right then and there. But when you're stressed about what school you're going to go to, or like does like this test that I'm about to take is going to make or break my future, that is stressful. That is so stressful, and no one does their best work when they're stressed like that. Like it just doesn't happen. So what's important to know is that if you give yourself options, you reduce that need for stress. And what ends up happening is you're going to end up doing much higher quality work and having better options.
Mhm. Yeah, no, absolutely. I mean, I think it's important. The less stress you have, it's kind of finding not no stress where you do nothing, but not being so stressed where you can't perform. I think that optimal amount of where you know you have options and you can have a little bit of healthy pressure kind of kicking you forward is really what a lot of students need.
And that's what the stretch goal is for. That's what the stretch school is for. Is that's to push you. It's to strive for
Yes.
something. You need that tension in your life between where you are and where you want to be. That's part of living. But not so much that it's like your future hinges on that. Because like
Yeah.
the burn the boats analogy with education, it doesn't work. I would not burn any boats with education. I would have lots of boats.
You would have lots of boats and a lot of bridges, allowing you to get
Yes,
onto many different safe pathways instead. That's what you should do instead.
exactly. There are times to burn the boats and have bridges burnt, but education is not one of them.
No. Well,
That's pretty
you want to be
colorful,
an
hey?
engineer.
Can we
Yeah.
put that on the
I think that's
Instagram, do you
not
think?
bad. We'll
Yeah,
see. Well,
that
we
the
can
quote was
definitely
that
do
the
it.
quote of the episode?
Quote of the episode: Do not burn any bridges. Build the bridges across different pathways.
Yeah. Yeah. So
Our
that
two
was
viewers that turned into three viewers. We actually did get three viewers, which was cool. I just
come
face
on.
bombed at that one, I think.
We had three viewers.
Yes, we had three viewers.
That's awesome. So your mom, my mom, and who else? Who was the other
I'm
view?
not sure.
We're gonna have to.
Um,
Welcome. So we got your mom, my mom, and whoever that third one is. Please reach out to us. Let us
Thank you
know.
very
Or
much.
you're being very very humble here. Like we had a lot more than three, especially you. Like you had tons of views.
I did. I did get tons of views.
Well, on Instagram where you can follow us, right?
Well, yes, if you can follow us on Instagram at AdmissionPrep Ed. and on TikTok at admissionprep.edu, where we'll be getting a lot more than 3 views. I think we got 2,000 views actually on our podcast clips.
Yeah,
And we
and I
also
think
came
at
up with
this
a
point,
name.
what's that? What's the name?
We accepted by Admission Prep.
Good name, right?
It
Because
is a
like the
good name.
A on it stands for both. So yeah, I mean, hey, listen, I think the viewers, our third viewer, who is not our mom, your mom or my mom, they don't know us anything. They're wonderful people. They helped us a lot in this world. But that third person who is listening all the way through here, thank you very much. But now you owe us. You have a little IOU that has been developed because we talked about a lot of stuff that we've learned over many, many years. And you got some value out of this. So here's all we ask for. Give us a like, give us a follow, give us a 5-star rating, right? Like what else can we ask for now that we've developed a little bit of an IOU with our third
I guess
listener
if it's
here?
on YouTube, subscribe. We
Subscribe,
have 20
subscribe.
20 subscribers in the time of filming or something like that.
Woo! Yeah, so you can be our 21st. And yeah, you know, we're aiming to share this. Like we have a lot of fun with these conversations, and so I'd like people to let us know things that they have questions about, things that they like. Put in the comments, say like, "Hey, I like this. I don't like this. Question on this. You didn't say enough about this. Jason, you're really mean about crushing dreams." You know, all that stuff. Like I don't intend to, but I will accept your feedback if that's what you say. What else? What else should we get from our third listener here?
I don't know.
That's all.
Come back to the next
Share
one,
it with your
please.
friends. What's
Come back to
that?
the, oh, yeah, share it as well and come back to the next one.
Yeah. So and we'll take your submissions. So thank you all for joining. We can call that the pod.
That's the pod. Accepted by Admission Prep. Thank you, folks.